Okay, so recording has started. So what we're going to be covering today is we're going to start off with kind of a big picture look at the property records. That's going to include things like features of property records, property names, geographic areas, town names, how to use contact records with properties. We're also going to be talking about organizing properties using the primary secondary properties tool. We'll talk about how to set some templates on the property list window so that you can see information about properties more easily, and just a quick breakdown about creating new properties. We're going to talk specifically about roll number and its importance there, especially in the context of things like a property import tool. We'll talk about the difference between what we call civic, legal, and rural addressing in FirePro. Those are different options we have for how to lay out information about property addresses. I'm going to show you how to do some customization of how your complete addresses appear. And then we're also going to talk about things like the street names list, about merging property records, about how to set up and manage geographic areas, how to use things like stock reports and how to include things on that, how to use the postal code calculations, how to deal with duplicate properties, which includes merging. And we'll also talk about how properties function in the context of the CAD import. So lots of topics to cover today. And again, if you have any follow-up questions or anything like that that you want more information on, please do put that in the chat. I will be keeping an eye on that as we continue through the session today. So let's start off just by talking a little bit about the features of standard property records in the system. Now, one of the things that happens is that when you go into the properties list window, you search for properties, the default search on this window is none. So it does not usually show any properties by default. If you want to see all your properties, every single one that you have, just hit the magnifying glass button in this window or press the enter key, and you will automatically get all your property records displayed on this list. You'll see in the top left-hand corner how many total property records you have. So you're going to see all the different total number of property records you have. And then if you scroll down, you're going to see those appear with information about the property, including complete address, roll folio number, and property name. So this is going to give you a bit of a breakdown of basic information about the properties that you have in your FirePro system. Now, these properties can come from several different sources, depending on where that stuff was put from initially. Normally, with a new FirePro system, we're going to import those from your municipal tax roll data or from some other source that we get. It is also possible to create these property records either automatically or manually. So exactly where the properties come from is going to depend a little bit on how your FirePro system was initially set up and how it's been used over time. If you're interested, one of the columns of information that you have on this list window, if you right click on the column header, is called updated date. Updated date can be kind of an interesting piece of information if you're trying to evaluate how up-to-date your property records are, because it's going to show you the last time that this particular property was edited or important changes were made to it. So we can see that we have a number here from as far back as 2008, but we also have stuff from 2022 if we change our sort on there. So updated date can be a useful piece of information if you're trying to evaluate how up to date your property records are. Now, if we look at a specific property address, there are several pieces of information that we can do. And let's see if I can find a slightly more detailed one there. So if we look at our individual property record, we can see that each one of these properties have a number of pieces of information attached to them that are fairly standard that you can expect to see for most property records. And those are going to be things like in the civic address section, street number and street name. There is a field called property name. Property name is usually used to put in the common terminology or the common name for an address. So for example, if I have a particular street address, but everybody knows it as the corner store, then you can just put that common name in that property name. This is just a tool to allow you to pick property records out of larger lists of items more easily and to identify properties more easily. We do also have a function in here called geographic area. And geographic area doesn't always appear automatically, but you can turn it on and we can help you out with that. Geographic area is a really handy tool for taking large groups of properties and tying them together into a specific reporting unit. This unit is generally going to lay over top of things like specific town names or information like that, but it can allow you to build things like different reporting areas if you have to do different statistical reports for activities. And it can also do things like create specific subdivisions or smaller units within your municipal property records that allow you to run reports more easily. So if you want to be running targeted reports on, say, a specific subdivision because you're trying to get information about stuff like your average response time in that area, the geographic area tool can be a really handy way to take a much larger list of properties and tie them together into a reporting unit that you might want to use. Now, with individual properties, there is also going to be what we call contacts attached to these properties. So normally what's going to happen is that most properties, we try to import those properties with at least a primary owner. Right? Now, every property can have as many different contact records as you want attached to it. So I can add additional contacts at any time. And each contact that I add has a drop-down list which indicates contact type. This is an editable, I'll get that, don't worry, an editable list. So you can see that there's been a variety of different contact types set up, and you can always add more if necessary. Now, when I'm setting up a contact, on each property, I can have one contact that's flagged as the primary owner and one contact that's flagged as the primary occupant. This can be the same contact record if you wanted to, right? I am the primary owner and primary occupant at my house. Actually, my wife's the primary occupant and the bank's the primary owner, but, on paper. So, you can set primary owner, primary occupant. You can't have multiple primary occupants though. And you can have as many contact records flagged as key holders as you want. Each contact record is going to have something in the way of name. Potentially you can have position. This is often in addition to the type. You can also have a business name. So if we're dealing with a business, or if you have multiple contacts, say in the same field, you can do that. You can have physical address. Each contact can also have multiple phone numbers, email addresses, and notes attached to it. Now, when I flag certain stuff as primary owner and primary occupant, that's going to make that contact's information appear in various different places for you. The most obvious place that it appears is that if we hit the general tab, we see primary owner, primary occupant. So that's going to show up on the general tab. Those primary owners and primary occupants are also going to copy over to new records. If I attach stuff to this property record, it's going to show up on reporting when I ask for that kind of owner and occupant information. This kind of indicates this is the primary. We try to do primary owner stuff as much as possible, usually from the tax roll. But again, whether you have that or not is going to be a bit dependent based on what we were able to set up with your FirePro system in the first place. So, you can have multiple contact records attached in there. An important thing to remember with property contact records is that the contact records are copied to things like inspections or incidents when those files are created. So every sub-record that's attached to this property has a copy of the contact based on the contacts at the time of that event. So if you change contact records on the primary property, it will not impact contact records on any historical information. You will still see the contacts for that property as they were at the time of the event, the inspection, the incident, the burn permit, whatever is in question. So it's always fine to keep your contact information on the property records up to date in order to make sure that you have relatively current information. Because the system automatically copies these over when you create new records, if you're doing things like inspections, it usually makes sense to update the contact records on the property before you actually create the inspection, because then they'll just flow across automatically and you don't have to duplicate. And so useful tips on that. Now, there's a ton of information potentially on properties that can include things like occupancy logs, owner information, geographic area. We can see there's a bunch of inspection information, potentially like building code classification or periodic inspection info. Most of this information is available through the list window in the various different columns that are possible. So because there can be a lot of different information on a property record, we've actually set up several different standard templates for viewing property information on this window for you by default. So if you hit the FP2 list template drop down in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see there's an address layout, there's a name layout, there's an inspection layout. These all show the same property records, but different information about those properties. So for example, if I was looking for inspection information, I could click on the inspection template, and now I see things on here like inspection due date or the last inspection date. I still see complete address, but I might also see primary occupant, and I could even use the right-click function here to add additional information like the primary owner phone number or the primary occupant phone number. As when we right-click on here, we can see there are a lot of different pieces of information that we can display here, which makes it easier to see info about the property records. Like all the FirePro list windows, you can update the template for yourself if you want to. So if you decide this is what I need to see, I've got this all widths all set the way I want it to, I can just right-click anywhere on the blue and select the option called Save as my list template or Save Inspection as my list template. If I look further down in the right-click menu here, though, there's a whole bunch of additional data update options that we have on this particular window. I'm going to go through these so that you understand how to use them, but they can be a really powerful tool for cleaning up and organizing your property records in bulk, as opposed to having to go through each individual record and update information. So we're gonna talk about how those records work. Now, if we want to create a brand new property record in FirePro, this is often going to be because the property address that we're looking for is not there, wasn't imported, it's a new location. All I need to do is in the properties list window, I hit the green plus button on the right-hand side. It's going to give me a whole list of different things that I can add from here. So I could add an incident directly to the highlighted property automatically, or a burn permit, or an invoice, or whatever I wanted to add. In this case, I'm just going to select property because I want to create a brand new property. This window does also have a really cool feature where if I do a search for a property, say 1, 2, 3, and we'll just pick a random Range Road 63. So I'm looking for this address. I hit the magnifying glass and I don't find anything, right? No results. That means that this particular address does not exist in my system. If I go in right now and use the green plus button and create a new property, it automatically asks me, do you want to add the search parameters to the new property record? Because the assumption here is I couldn't find the property I was looking for and I want to add a new. So I hit yes, and 123 Range Road 63 pops in here automatically. Now, normally with a new property, if I'm creating them in the system, I'm going to want to add a certain amount of information to them. And that's normally going to include things like town name. Town name's especially important if you want to run searches on activities that occur within a specific town. And potentially, I also want to include the station that this town falls within their fire protection area, because that does help me when I'm running certain reports as well. Now, I can then put in a bunch of additional information, like I could put in the property name. I can put in information about geographic area. I can put in complex and occupancy if I want to. I can put in Rollfolio number, but I don't have to do any of that. I can just put in the basic information, save this, and now I have this basic property file. I generally recommend trying to put in things like contacts if we have it. One of the sort of important things that you need to think about when you're creating new property records is, are you currently using a property import tool? And if you are, it's not a bad idea to add Rollfolio number here, because property import tools are generally going to look for Rollfolio number when they're creating new properties or updating properties. So again, we're going to talk about sort of how those property import tools work in a little more detail. But if you can get Rollfolio number from the municipality, then that's useful information to have. Broadly speaking, if you're not familiar, roll number is a unique ID that's set for every province, or sorry, every property in your province. And so each address is going to have its own unique Rollfolio number that we can use ideally as a unique identifier for the particular address. So good to have Rollfolio number if you can get it. Like I said, the property imports use that a lot. Now, when we're dealing with property information, physical property information, we tend to have multiple levels of addressing information that we have available, and that's often going to depend on, does this particular property have what we would call a fire address or a physical street address, and do we have something like a legal description for this property? So FirePro actually has 3 different tabs for address type information on a property record. There's the civic address, and this is normally going to be things like street number and street name, town name, potentially stuff like cross streets or street directionals. It's also got a legal description. This deals with more of a municipal legal information like a lot number, a plan number, a legal land description, stuff like that. And we do also have, if we go into our custom settings here under properties, the ability to show what we call a rural description tab. Now, I think in most rural settings, the rural, what we call rural addressing is what we would refer to as a legal land description. But this can include part, section, township, range, and meridian. So in some contexts, that's because FirePro does work pretty extensively with rural departments, we don't have what we would consider standard civic address information. So the rural description is an option for you if you need it. The rural description and the civic address are normally the sort of things that's going to show up in this complete address field. So in that context, let's talk about the complete address field. So in FirePro, we have a display field on the list window that we call complete address. We use it when we're printing reports and for displaying information. And this is actually an aggregate of several different pieces of information from an individual property record. So for example, if I go down here and look at this address, interesting, let's find it. If I go down here and look at this address, I can have, that is actually super good. Let's take a further look in here. There we go. Okay, so in the standard civic address, I have fields for street number, street name, potentially street directional, right? If there's a Highway 11 North and a Highway 11 South, I can have that in there, and I have town name information. So when we create a complete address field, we're actually putting together information from all those different pieces of data on the record to create a single field for complete address. And complete address, the layout of this field is actually customizable. So if you go into the setup menu under custom settings, there's an option under properties called format for addresses with suite number. And this is actually going to allow us to tweak how the complete address field works in terms of, if there's a suite A, so for example, if I had 123 Main Street Unit 1, this would show 123 Main Street -1. So I can adjust a little bit about where that information comes from. This would allow me to then see my complete address information in a slightly different way if I wanted to. If I go down, find one like this, and put in a suite number, this is going to change. If I've adjusted it, it's going to change exactly how that appears on my complete address list. So we can tweak that a little. Complete address will also pull in information from both the rural description and the civic address. If there is no civic address, it will use information from the rural description tab to display, which is something that we see more like this. So there's a couple of different ways you can populate information in there for those different records. So those are all things that are going to determine how you see information on those properties. Now, what also can happen is that when you are in the process of importing property records into FirePro or creating property addresses, we do get in the situation sometimes where we have street names that are not necessarily always consistent with each other. So we might see, for example, 58A Street on here and 58th Street Close. Those might be the same thing. Or in this case, we can see we have 60 Ave and 60 Ave. That is not going to be that helpful because from FirePro's perspective, something on 60 Ave and something on 60 Ave are going to be completely different properties, which can result in duplication or inconsistencies when I'm running searching. So the ability to clean up this street names list is a really important aspect of managing your property files in the system. If you want to make changes to your street names list, you can open any property record and use this little edit list button right next to it. So this is going to bring up our full list of street names in the program. And there are several different ways that we can make changes to the street names list. The simplest one is I can just select a specific entry on this list, change it, and if this entry matches another entry at any point and I save it, those two entries and all the associated files will get merged together to create a single entry. And so any property that was previously on 60 Ave is now going to be attached to 60th Ave, and things will be consistent. This can be quite helpful in terms of having to go through and clean things up. There is also a much more robust tool on there where I can actually, on this street names list window, select several street names by left-clicking and dragging to highlight them, right-click on the window, and select the option called, maybe I don't have a merge function. Yeah, sorry, this particular, we'll talk about merging in another context, but I can just edit particular records so that they match. And as soon as I save, it will auto merge all those entries. So that can be a really good broad scale way of cleaning things up in your system. We also have a tool in this street names list, which is called the change suffixes tool. So the change suffix tool allows you to do really broad scale changes to large numbers of street names at the same time. So if I hit the change suffix button, this is going to bring me into the change suffix tool. So the first thing that I might do is if I hit the load all suffixes button, that is going to automatically go through all of my street names and show me the suffix information, the last word on these street names sections. So we can see here, I've got a whole bunch. Some of these probably we don't want to change because these are, for example, the suffix for Range Road 63 in this context. But then we see stuff like Ave, Avenue, Boulevard, BV, CL. So what we can see is that on various different street names in this list, we have some which are formatted as AVE, some which are formatted as Avenue. And in this context, it's often really important to be consistent. We're going to talk in a second about how those CAD import tools, where we import information from dispatch, this is going to try to match up your street names with the information that dispatch provides. So it can be really useful to have this as a consistent set that you are the same format in all places. So for example, if I identify on here that I have some which are entered as AVE and some which are entered as Avenue, and I want to standardize, say I want to standardize it as AV, which is the NENA 911 standard for street naming. I can just say change all my AVEs to AV, change all my avenues to AV. I could go through and change my lanes to LN if I wanted to do that. All my roads to RD. I can standardize this stuff as much as I want. And when I hit continue, the system is automatically going to go through, find everything which previously was set as road and change it to RD. It will also automatically merge entries when it does this. So, we'll change the street names. We can see now I've got Quarry RD, Rainy Creek RD. Those have been standardized. When I save, it's going to ask me, do I want to change all this stuff? I can hit yes to all. And now I have changed all the entries in my street names list, potentially. I didn't change street, but I could. To a more standardized format, which is hopefully going to be consistent with dispatch and consistent internally. So this can be a really handy way to take a list which is potentially kind of messy and clean it up. So a good example would be if I've determined that I want to change all my entries on this list that say street to just say ST, then I just need to hit the edit list button here, go to the change suffixes tool, load my suffixes, scroll down till I find street. I'm going to change this to ST and hit continue. Changes all the street names and I'll say yes to all. Now in this case, there's going to be a few that I might still have to change manually. The street close, for example, ones, because this is a multiple tool, but I can just manually change any of those as well. And then I am pretty much set up and good to go. So now I have pretty much all my streets switched over from my previous format to ST. So everything is consistent and uses a standard naming convention. Often you will have problems with this, or there will be issues with this when you've done a large scale property import, because what happens in a huge data set like a municipal tax roll data is that inconsistent naming decisions or spelling errors or things from the original data then gets mirrored into your system. So that can be something that's quite important to clean up. So those tools can be a handy way for you to take what can potentially be a bit of a messy list and standardize it down to make it easier to work with, easier to find things, cleaner and more consistent. Now, when I talk about finding things, an important thing that we want to think about is that many of you are probably running a property import, or sorry, an incident import from their dispatch system. So what happens when we run an incident import from dispatch is that FirePro is going to take a look. We'll go and it's a long time period. So it will take a look on each individual incident. It will try to find a specific, it'll pull up the actual, let's find one that's a bit more standard, right? So it will look at the address that is provided by dispatch. This text in the incident address is the text that is provided by dispatch, and it will try to match those addresses with the actual individual property records in your FirePro system. So it's gonna, in this case, it's gonna break it down into street number, street name, town name, and see if it can match that information. It is a computer, so it tries to match exactly, which means that if you have every single one of your property records set to Avenue is set to AVE, and what dispatch sends is AV, it will not successfully match any Avenue address record ever. So that's the sort of thing that we want to look at cleaning up in the context of the cleanup tools. If a property record is not matched to an address on an incident poll, you will see a button on here called Find Property, which allows you to look for property records. Those incidents will also be put on a tool that we call the Unlinked Incidents List. So if I'm in the incident list window, I can go to the red toolbox and select Open Unlinked Incidents List, and I will see a list of any address that it was not able to match on this system. And if you click on the address, it will show you what the address it's trying to find. And there's a number of reasons it might not match. That's going to be sometimes based on things like addressing format. Sometimes it's going to be based on the fact that it's just a street name instead of a full address. But I can also go in here and in this red toolbox say try property linking again, which will actually go through. And hey, because I standardized my avenue from AVE to AV, now it was able to match some more of those automatically. Also means that they're going to match better in the future. So spending some time cleaning up and standardizing your street names, especially in the context of things like a property or a dispatch import, can be really, really helpful. Now, there's a number of other things that you might want to look at doing on your property records. So property records are kind of unique in FirePro in that we've built a bunch of heavy-duty data update tools that you can use to update large numbers of property records with information at the same time. Because in terms of sheer volume, property records tend to be one of the largest ones. And pretty much most of those tools are available through the properties list window. If I highlight some specific records, I can right click on this window and I get a bunch of additional update tools that I can run on property records. So we're going to talk about secondary, tertiary properties in a sec. Hydrant records, primary hydrants and secondary hydrants that's a very specialized tool related to hydrant records. But the ones down here called set are ones that allow you to add information to a whole bunch of property records at the same time. So for example, if I had a subdivision in the municipality and I wanted to use the geo area to identify that subdivision, I can highlight a bunch of records on this list, and I can highlight by left click and dragging. I can hold down the control key. If I hold down the shift key and select a whole bunch of records, it'll select a whole bunch. However I want to select those records, I highlight them, and then I right click and I can say set geo area, and this is going to allow me to pick one of my geo areas in there. Hit OK, and it'll set that geo area for all those property records. So when I actually look now at geo area, I can see I've got different geo areas set, and I can modify large groups of properties into specific geographic areas. So this can be handy for filing and organizing. Likewise, I can highlight, right click, I can set the properties into a specific township. This might be useful if all your properties are not currently assigned to a town and you just want to have your own town name attached in there. You just hit set township, pick a town from your town names list, Hit OK, it'll assign town names to all of those selected properties that you wanted to do that for. You can also, with this highlight list, set postal codes for properties. So if you have a set of postal codes that you want to add, again, for automating correct reports or things like that, you can do that. In terms of postal codes, there is also a tool that you can use. It's in the red toolbox up at the top of the properties window, and it's called Calculate Postal Codes. Canada Post has a tool that you can actually submit addresses to, and it will send you back what the postal codes for those addresses is. If you use Calculate Postal Codes, it'll go through every highlighted property, send that address to the postal code system, and it will go in and check to see if it can determine postal code from that tool from the Canada Post. So that also can be a quick way, is if you don't have postal codes on some of these, you can quickly update that information from the Canada Post API. There is also a tool in here where you can set station. So setting station can be really handy because it allows you to identify groups of properties that fall into the fire protection area for a specific station. So this would let me say, I could do something like say, okay, well, we know 44th Street is all in the area of this particular station. So I search, I highlight all the ones I want, and then I say set station, and these all fall into the station 1 area, for example. So that is a handy tool. I can also deal with some things like building code classifications, occupancy, inspection frequency, and default inspectors. I'm going to go over this stuff in more detail when I do a much more detailed training session on inspections and managing inspections specifically. But this would allow me to do things like say, okay, I want to find everything in a specific occupancy group. Actually, let's do a specific building code classification. Right? Find me everything in a specific building code classification. Those building code classifications I know need to be inspected on an annual basis. I can right click on here, say set inspection frequency. These properties need to be inspected every year. So now when I look at the property itself in the inspection section, it's going to show me how frequently these properties need to be inspected, and based on last inspection date can set next inspection date. But this can be a convenient way for you to flag large groups of properties as saying these need annual inspections or these are inspected biannually. So those tools are all very useful in the context of updating large numbers of properties. Now, another problem that you might have with property records is that in some contexts, sorry, my cat has decided he wants to get involved in training. So, good God, very helpful. So one of the things that might happen with properties, whether you've imported them from a municipal tax roll data or you've entered them manually, is that properties often get into a state where you have a bunch of duplicates of property records. One quick way of checking for duplicates is in the properties list window, there's a red toolbox, and there's an option under here called check for duplicate properties. When you check for duplicate properties, it's going to ask you, do you want to check roll folio number as well? I normally recommend starting this process by saying, no, you don't want to check roll folio number, because we can have situations where there are multiple properties with the same address that have different roll numbers. And that's usually going to be subdivided properties or strata properties, things that might have multiple units, but they're all under the same roll number. But this is going to give me a duplicate set. So in this case, it said 97 duplicates found. And what I can see here is I have some addresses which are the same. Now, these ones are imported without address, so those are interesting. Some of these obviously are part of a larger unit. All right, they've got different property names in here, potentially different owner information. But some of these properties, like these ones, are just straight duplicates of existing property records, right? They've, we can see there's two, they've got the same address, the same street name. Usually we don't like those, they're not helpful. So getting rid of them is a handy tool. So the first thing that we can do if we want to clear duplicate properties is we have a function in FirePro called merging. So merging properties allows you to get rid of one of the property records, transfer all the stuff that was attached to it over to a different property record. You still keep all the incidents, all the burn permits, everything like that, but you get rid of one of the two. So one of the ways to do that is if you are in the property record itself and you decide this is the one of these two that I want to get rid of, right? This has less information than the other one. So I can go to the red toolbox up here and select the option called Merge Property. So Merge Property is going to delete the property that I'm on right now, but it'll take any subrecords and move it over. So I'm going to hit yes, and I'm going to open this other 5119 that I wanted to keep. And we can see that there's a button here called Merge into this property. So that's going to get rid of the original record that we started with, move everything over to this property, and keep it up. So now if I rerun my search on my duplicate properties, I have less duplicates now. The other one we were looking at doesn't show up on this list because we merged it. Another way to merge properties is if you are on this list window, you can left click and drag to highlight a couple of properties or more than one if you want to, and then right click on the window and select merge selected properties. So merging selected properties is going to let us pick which of the two property records I want. They appear on this drop-down list in the same order. They appear on here, and I hit OK. And now we can see one of them has been removed from the system, and we've kept the other one that we want to keep. You can do this with a dozen properties if you wanted to do that, right? Oh, these are all duplicates, unnecessary, don't need them. Right click, merge selected properties, keep the first one on the list, and now cleared and gone, which means that if I go in and again check for duplicate properties, I can see I have a much smaller list of duplicates. So checking for and merging out duplicate properties can be a really effective way to clean up some of that incorrect duplication. This is usually something that you want to do after you've cleaned up the street names list, because the duplicate property tool will not pick up that 51 Smith Street and 51 Smith ST are the same, because it's a computer and they're very literal, right? The great thing is that computers do exactly what you tell them to do, but they're also terrible because they do exactly what you tell them to do. So if you need a hand with reviewing any of that stuff, going over these tools, then definitely talk to us, set up a training seminar, things like that. So there's a lot of the functionality that is tied into this right-click menu for dealing with setting properties information in bulk, and this can be an effective way to tidy up, organize, and standardize your properties. One of the other tools that we have for organizing and standardizing properties is what we call the primary and secondary properties tool. So in many cases, you're going to have fairly complicated properties in your fire protection area. Those can be things like mini malls or strip malls, where you might have a single address that has multiple units. It might be a large building that has commercial space on the ground floor and apartments upstairs, or even a multi-unit apartment building where you've got single addresses with suites and a bunch of units. Trailer parks are also good examples of when you have fairly complicated addresses. So what the primary and secondary tool lets you do is that you can go in, look at a specific address, and we can see we have a property type here with standalone. So standalone indicates this property is independent, it's a detached address, it is by itself its own thing. But what I might decide, or I might identify, is that for this particular office building, there's actually 4 different offices included in this particular property. So, at this particular location, we might have several different offices that we want to deal with. But in that context, the building might have a specific set of owners, and the individual properties have different occupants that we want to keep track of. So what I can do here is, let's assume that this particular property record is the one we want to set as the primary. We'll call it, say, the 50th Ave Center. And so I can set this property as primary. So what that means is that other property records can now be attached to this primary to create a larger unit for reporting purposes and just to keep things organized. So what I could do here is say, okay, so we know we have a lawyer's office that's on here as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a duplicate of the primary property. I'm going to say this is Suite 101. And we'll say this is Smith and Smith. Again, I can put in separate contacts for this secondary property. I can put in different inspection frequencies and different building code classifications. This is, for all intents and purposes, a completely separate record, but I can say set this as a secondary, and I want this to be attached to my primary record here. So what this is going to let me do is I'll just do a search for this street address. So now if I look for this particular street address, I can see I have the primary record and I have secondaries. I could have multiple secondary suites on here. This would allow me to have different owner information attached to the primary, and it would then allow me to have different occupant information attached to all the secondaries, allowing you to create these much more complicated properties where you might want to keep track of separate inspection histories, different call responses, right? If you're dealing with an apartment building where you're doing responses in various different units in that apartment building and you want to keep track of that, using the secondary tool can be a really effective way to take those larger, more complicated structures, break them up into smaller units that you have more detailed tracking on. Yeah. So again, we can give you some assistance in how to set that stuff up. But those are all useful tools in terms of managing and organizing your properties. We are getting towards the end of the hour, so this is normally the time when I like to throw the door open for questions. If you have questions about anything we've talked about, then please feel free to take yourself off mute or put questions in the chat, and we will go over those.